For those of you who've been here before, I usually start, or every time this meeting starts, I'm going to start with the same disclaimer script from our legal team. Um, so bear with me. I am communicating today in my official capacity on behalf of the FedRAMP Program Management Office at the General Services Administration. To ensure effective engagement and transparency with industry, I will be sharing information based on what I know at the present time. The information I plan to share today is provided to enhance transparency between industry and the FedRAMP PMO, but it is possible that some of this information may change at a later date because no final decisions have been made at this time. However, I think it is important to have this dialogue so we can move forward in a transparent manner, but I wanted you to have that context before I got into the substance of my presentation. My commitment to you is to continue this dialogue and share any new developments as soon as I can. Additionally, any reference in this conversation to any specific commercial product, process, or service, or the use of any trade, firm, or corporation name is for the information and convenience of the public and does not constitute endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by GSA. Okay, thank you for listening to that. I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping for today's meeting in particular because there's something different. We have the Q&A feature enabled. So ask your questions as they come up, and Pete Waterman is here, and later on, he will answer them. Awesome. Okay, plenty of people have registered for this meeting, so again, we've turned off the ability to unmute yourself, so we won't have to chase down interruptions. Discussions and collaboration may still take place in the GitHub discussions board created for this working group, and there's a dedicated questions thread for this meeting that you'll find pinned to the top there. We also invite you to post any ideas that you have there that come up. And we plan to actively participate in those discussions. So this will be another way to get your questions answered. With that, today's agenda, we're going to quickly go over a recap of the last couple weeks of GitHub discussions. Then we're going to talk about how these GitHub discussions are informing our work. And then probably the part that you guys are here for, we are going to be pretty extensively discussing the phase 1 pilot. And after we go over the initial information about that, we will be passing it off to Pete, who will do an Ask Me Anything style. So post your questions in the Q&A for that. We will briefly touch on requests for comment that are out, and then we'll talk next steps. Awesome. And finally, this is the last little bit of housekeeping before we actually get to the real stuff. How we'll work. The intent is for us to meet bi-weekly for 30 minutes to an hour. These meetings are touch points to provide updates on progress both within this group and the greater FedRAMP 20X community. The majority of the engagement and work in this group will be done in our GitHub repository discussion forum. And one of our guiding principles is for all work to take place in public with maximum transparency. So working in GitHub discussions ensures that all community members, present and future, have access to our work. Myself and Dan will work to facilitate discussions, answer questions, and work through problems identified within the forum. So anything brought up in these town hall meetings should also be posted on GitHub, otherwise it may be forgotten. And in that spirit, we will be posting a follow-up Q&A page to GitHub with the Q&A information from this session.
Awesome. So speaking of the GitHub discussion forums, Kylie and I wanted to thank everyone again for their lively participation on the discussion boards. As you can see, we continue to have a lot of interesting ideas and discussions going on each week. I want to give a quick shout out to our top contributors there on the right for this 2-week period. Thank you for your engagement. It really had these 5 people in particular have really contributed some really exciting ideas and content this week. We're starting to see some really interesting stuff develop. If you haven't been following the discussions on GitHub, you may want to check back in and catch up on some of the latest conversations. There's some really interesting things happening, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next couple of slides. And for anyone who wants to add to the conversation, especially during this next 2-week period, FedRAMP is going to be breaking down the cloud native architecture key security indicator and discussing automated assessment methods. We'll also be actively answering questions and giving feedback on pilot related things. So as you'll see through the rest of today's presentation, we're really excited for people to get started working on the pilot, and we're committed to being available as resources to help answer questions. If you're new here and you want to participate, the link to the discussion board can be found on the screen on this slide, in the chat, and also on our website. By participating, you are helping to contribute to the future of FedRAMP and providing input that will help to inform future FedRAMP standards, particularly for the 20X program. In the last 2 weeks, we asked people to weigh in on 2 specific KSI validations, multi-factor authentication and change management. It took a few days for this conversation to really get started, but we ended up with some really great themes and ideas about change management and even some good pseudocode for validating phishing-resistant MFA. This was really exciting stuff to see because it kind of brought us to the next layer of the program in that we're starting to see real ideas, real examples, real code coming together to help answer some of the goals of the program. Excellent. So we've had this slide the last couple of weeks about how this is informing FedRAMP's work, and a little inside baseball. We almost didn't include this slide this week. We were trying to cut to make time for Pete's AMA, which we know is the most exciting part of the program. But we really felt it was important to highlight the direct connection between the community work group and the phase 1 pilot. So as I said before, we've already seen some examples in the last 2 weeks, including discussions about leveraging existing tools and solutions like CISA Scuba Gear and other ideas about designing programmatic assessment methods. And this is exactly the kind of engagement we need in order for 20X to be successful. Seeing these ideas and other discussions has helped us, the FedRAMP, to frame the phase 1 pilot to our leadership and get the go-ahead to launch this next phase of the program. So we're really excited to see where you take this next. Our overarching goal is that we set the standards and policies that enable private innovation to create the solution. So we've set the standard by releasing a draft version of the key security indicators, and now we're creating a space for private innovation to create the solution by way of the 20X phase 1 pilot. The premise for all this is really straightforward. You design your own methods to address our key security indicators, wrap it all up in a machine-readable format, and then submit to FedRAMP for the most straightforward authorization path to date. It's obviously going to be a little more nuanced than that, so I'm going to pass it off to Kylie to say a little more.
Gotta unmute myself. Awesome, thanks, Dan. So let's talk about the FedRAMP 20X Phase 1 pilot. So as some of you may have noticed, FedRAMP is moving really quickly and transforming at a relentless pace, which might sound familiar to this audience of tech employees in particular, not so familiar for traditional government work. So you really need to dig into our pilot materials to understand what's going on here, and you can find those on our website under the 20X menu, and I think Pete also posted it in the chat under the FedRAMP.gov/20X/phase 1. So don't forget to read those later if you haven't already. It will restate a lot of this information and also include a little bit more depth. FedRAMP 20X is based on the concept of key security indicators, which we talk about a lot, and they are specific security capabilities based on the NIST controls that cloud services must demonstrate. Key security indicators are designed specifically for the assessment of modern commercial cloud services in alignment with security best practices. So our phase 1 pilot is really aligned with the key security indicators, and we hope to understand how the key security indicators can be used to determine automated assessment and validation capabilities for cloud native service providers, assess how SOC 2 Type 2 audit materials can reduce documentation when applied as KSI evidence, investigate how 3PAOs can use automated machine-readable packages for assessment, and define elements of a machine-readable validation package. Along the way, we will also explore how platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and other third-party tools can support customer validation in this pilot and beyond. So, in the beginning stages of this new thing called 20X, we want to give you, the cloud service providers, an opportunity to do what you do best. Innovate, be scrappy, be ingenious, and show us how you hope to engage with FedRAMP in the new 20X era. As we've said before, we want to set the standards and policy so that private innovation can design the solution. Private innovation is on the call with us today, and we've already set the standards. Now it's your turn to design the solution. Okay, for qualifying participants who deliver on the FedRAMP 20X goal, we will issue FedRAMP 20X low authorizations without an agency sponsor and prioritize you for moderate in the next phase. These will be issued in weeks, not years, which is a pretty mind-blowing pace. And if your goal is FedRAMP moderate, don't sit back and wait. Start now. This is a great way to get your foot in the door and get priority into the first 20X moderate authorizations. Okay, so I know all of this sounds very exciting. Who should participate? As mentioned previously in other meetings on the GitHub discussion board, etc., we are starting out with super lightweight, simple cloud service offerings and moving up from there to more complicated offerings. We are not necessarily limiting participation to just those super simple cloud service offerings, but those ones are the most likely to receive an authorization by the end of the pilot. So the cloud service offerings that meet the following criteria are the most likely to successfully complete the phase 1 pilot and end up with an authorization. One, deployed on an existing FedRAMP authorized cloud service offering using primarily cloud native services from that underlying host provider and also using only FedRAMP authorized external services. Two, service needs to be provided via the public internet only. So that's browsers or APIs. That does not include web or mobile applications or other clients/agents. You should have completed a SOC 2 Type 2 audit or a federal agency ATO process within the last 12 months. And finally, have a 3PAO ready to conduct a pilot 20X assessment informed by the key security indicators. We're trying to move really quickly on this, so having those pre-established relationships is a really big advantage in pilot participation. Okay, so remember, FedRAMP 20X is not based around the controls and baselines that you might be used to. Key security indicators show the capabilities that we're looking for, and we're not worried in this phase about doing things the same way with a different skin on it. We are not talking about automating the existing approach or using AI to create the same old narrative-driven hundreds of pages of documents. That's not what we're trying to do. We expect participants to focus entirely on the key security indicators. So we want to see auto-generated evidence for the key security indicator validations as much as is possible. And a lot of that can come from your FedRAMP authorized host providers' underlying configurations. We want to see all of the KSI validation responses and evidence compiled into a machine-readable data format of your choosing and design, plus some sort of lightweight documentation or a schema to help us understand your format. We don't really have any official formats defined at this time. We're moving really quickly, and we want to see what you guys envision for your data formats. We want to see a 3PAO review your processes for generating evidence and attesting that they are accurate. And the 3PAOs may also provide evidence for KSI validations that are not easily automatable in some cases. And finally, we want to see a proposal or prototype for continuously reporting on these KSIs, whether that be a mock-up of an API or a short document explaining how you would continuously report on certain validations. So For those of you who are wondering what it is you need to do or submit to us to participate in this pilot, it's all on this slide. Here it is. This is the Phase 1 20X pilot package, which, as you may notice, is far less exhaustive than a traditional FedRAMP package. It all fits on one slide. We aren't giving you like a whole textbook on what we want you to do. That's on purpose. This is the most flexible phase. We want you to be creative and innovative, and we plan to use the Phase 1 submissions to inform more specific standards and guidance in future phases. We also want Phase 1 submissions to be publicly available to the extent possible to set an example for the community and allow for iterative improvements. These working group meetings and discussions may serve as a forum to share outstanding submissions and novel approaches to applying these key security indicators. Cool. And the Phase 1 pilot is relevant to the activities of multiple working groups. And for this reason, we have a category called the 20X Phase 1 pilot that you can find in a number of different working groups. So you can find it in automating assessment, which is this working group. And in the GitHub discussions here, you can post, talk, ask questions, ideate around auto-generated evidence and machine-readable data formats. It's also present in the Applying Existing Frameworks working group, where you can post about wherever auto-generated evidence doesn't quite fit, SOC 2 audits mapped to the KSI validations could be accepted. So you can talk about how to apply your existing certs to the FedRAMP 20X KSIs in the Applying Existing Frameworks working group. And also the Continuously Reporting working group is the place to go. Whoops, sorry. Is the place to go to talk about prototypes and proposals for reporting continuously and which KSIs are the most conducive to do that. These working groups will be your best resource when it comes to getting feedback and getting your questions answered by both the PMO, FedRAMP, and the community. I'm going to pass it off to Dan to discuss an example flow for how a cloud service provider might participate in the pilot.
Thanks, Kylie. So Kylie just went over, the requirements and the expectations for the pilot, but we thought it might be helpful to put it all together into a kind of example workflow here. So a couple of things to keep in mind as we walk through this. First of all, pilot participation is going to look different depending on the cloud service provider, what platform they're using, and the approaches that they choose to take. At this stage, FedRAMP is being as open as we possibly can to allow for innovation from this community. Our hope is that from the submissions that we get back during the pilot program, we'll identify the ones that we think have the most effectiveness and the most potential, and we'll require things like that in future programs. We really encourage people to start working on this right now. Don't wait for more clarification or more guidance. As we said, we want this to be really open-ended and see what people can come up with. So now is the time to go ahead and get started. And when submissions are open in a few weeks, we're going to be reviewing them in the order that we receive them. So if you want to get your submission reviewed faster, have it ready and be able to submit as soon as we open for that. All right, all that being said, in the interest of clarity, we put together this kind of example workflow for what pilot participation could look like to help you understand our vision. So first step, the cloud service provider looks at the KSIs, they feel like they meet the eligibility criteria, and they get together and develop a process. This process is going to collect data from the cloud service offering environment. It's going to do things like perform checks to confirm components are configured as expected. It's going to use all of that data that it collects to generate a machine readable file. This can be JSON, XML, whatever. We're open to whatever submission you feel is best. The file needs to include the KSI validation and whether it is met or not, true or false, and then associated evidence. So you say that you meet particular validation, then we want to see some evidence for that. And again, we're not prescriptive about what type of evidences are acceptable. We are looking for evidence that is machine generated and can be recreated kind of on demand. So cloud service providers looking for authorization aren't the only participants here. Our expectation is that you're working with your IaaS or PaaS providers to develop tools for you to help with KSI validation. So a lot of the KSIs can be validated by looking at settings that you have with that particular vendor. And so working with those vendors to develop an automated way to validate and confirm those settings are correct, we think is exactly the path that we're hoping people take. Same thing applies for GRC and other automation tools that build in these capabilities. We know a lot of tools already have capabilities to validate these kinds of things, and we don't want anyone to recreate the wheel. If you've got something that already does this, include it in your submission, and that's a great way to get ahead of the game. Okay, so next step, the cloud service provider then creates a continuous reporting prototype or plan. So we want the data file at a point in time, but we also want to know from you, how would you regenerate this report on some continuous schedule? Ideally, we want reports that can be generated on demand, so that they're always up to date. But that said, the more often the report can be generated, the better. But we're just looking for you to propose, a plan or some sort of prototype that shows how you would continuously update this data over time. Okay, next phase, the 3PAO is going to review the process that you're using to generate your file. They're going to look at the underlying subprocesses that are being used to generate different pieces of evidence. They're also going to review the evidence and attest to the accuracy of the different validation responses. They may also fill in some gaps where an automated assessment cannot be performed if you have, as we've said in some of the agreements, if you've already had an existing 3PAO assessment, or if you have a SOC 2 Type 2 report that that also validated some of the requirements that we're looking for here, you can go ahead and reference those in your automated machine readable data format to say this is validated by my SOC 2 report or by my 3PAO report, and provide some links or excerpts or whatever from those documents to support that. Finally, once the CSP has finalized their deliverables, you have your data file, you have your plan for continuous reporting. You will send all of that, submit all of that to FedRAMP. FedRAMP then is going to review the submission again, as I said, in the order it was received. And we may provide some feedback or ask additional questions. We may also ask to do like a tabletop exercise or something like that in order to kind of further understand or verify what you've reported to us. Finally, if FedRAMP determines that the deliverables meet the FedRAMP 20X standards, then we will issue a 12-month FedRAMP 20X low authorization, and successful pilot participants will have priority in future phases that expand to moderate. So I know this has been asked a lot. If you are a moderate CSP, you can still participate in this pilot, right? If you're approved for moderate, you're also approved for low. So you can go ahead and participate in this pilot. It should be easy for you to get the low authorization, and then you'll be prioritized to participate in future phases where we'll be authorizing people at moderate and eventually high. Okay. Moving on, this is the part we've all been waiting for. We're going to invite our FedRAMP director, Pete Waterman, to come online and answer your questions. These can be questions about the phase 1 pilot or about anything else you like. I see we already have some questions in the Q&A tab, as well as some questions that our community working groups teed up prior to the meeting. So let's go ahead and get started. Pete, would you like to say anything to get us going?
Now let's do it.
All right. So I'm just going to start us out with some questions from the chat. First of all, the very first question in the chat, as I just mentioned previously, in the phase 1 pilot limited to only FedRAMP low offerings, what about moderate and high?
So I can't emphasize enough during this Q&A and beyond to spend a bit of time, if you're interested in this, really looking at that webpage, which is there for a reason. It gives a lot of details on this. Our intent is low to begin with. Phase 1 is low. Once we start delivering on lows and we have a good feeling for how that looks, we're going to expand that to moderate. And this is, again, within the specific qualifications of like a cloud native service built on top of an existing FedRAMP authorized IaaS or PaaS. Once we get moderate delivered, We're going to take a look at whether or not it's time to go straight to high for software as a service, or if we need to go in a different direction and bring more people in at low, wider. We'll figure it out. I think phase two will probably, phase one is probably going to be a few months. Phase two will be a few months, and it's pretty hard to predict what things are going to look like 6 to 9 months from now at the speed that we're moving. So my biggest encouragement is that if you are not FedRAMP authorized and you are seeking FedRAMP authorization and you have not built a good Rev 5 package at the impact level that you were looking for authorization at, you should participate in the pilot, because we will get you that low quick if you can build something cool, and then you will be able to prioritize for moderate directly after.
So there's another kind of related question came in the Q&A. Do we have any idea what phase is going to be FedRAMP High, or any idea of the timeline for when that's going to be available?
Yeah, let's just put a pin in high for a few months, and we'll revisit when we get there.
And I just want to remind the community that I'm asking these hard questions of Pete at risk of my own employment. So we're all on the same team here together. Let's see. Would it make sense to have, and this is a good question, would it make sense to have an application/portal with a visual readout of the current details of the CSP's offering? Think Power BI dashboard, but more enhanced. Agencies, the 3PO and FedRAMP PMO can log into these portals to see results.
Yes, anonymous participant. You see the future. That's exactly right. That's the continuous reporting working group is intended to kind of bandy around those ideas. I very much expect a future where cloud service providers are making information available to agency customers via similar or the same customer compliance portals that they do use right now. If you have a security center, you make stuff available to your private sector customers, you should be able to fold that same stuff into making it available for government customers. We want to make that as easy, simple, reusable as possible. So yes.
Excellent, excellent. Another great question from the community here. Will FedRAMP Low require boundary diagrams? And if so, are there ways to automate creation of boundary diagrams?
You tell me, fam. So what we ask for is a complete inventory of your system that is within the boundary, that is machine readable, how you want to present that, what you want to add with it, what makes the most sense for you, and how it matches up with the key security indicators. It'll be interesting to see how you interpret that. But take a look at the key security indicators in depth, the ones that we have available for draft review right now. That should give you an idea of what kind of depth of information we're looking for, especially at low.
Next question. So the GRC tools that a CSP is using to capture evidence in an automated way, do the tools need to already be FedRAMPed?
No. In fact, like I would specifically say, if you are a GRC tool, if you are an automation tool, and you don't have a path to FedRAMP authorization right now via an agency sponsor, this is your path. Build this for yourself first and bring others with you. I mean, even if you do it at the same time, build it for yourself and for others at the same time. We'll put you, we'll move the first in, first out a little bit if you've got a good package, review yours, give you an authorization, and then bring in other people that worked with you. Strongly, strongly encourage, like this idea that GRC tools have to be FedRAMPed at the same impact level as the system that they're reviewing is not necessarily something that's going to stick around for much longer, but more importantly, we want automation tools and GRC tools that are good, that are modern, that have solid approaches to how they do things in the FedRAMP marketplace. This is your way to do it.
Another really good question from an anonymous participant. Is there any value for a CSP that already has a FedRAMP High authorization to participate in the phase 1 trial?
So if you are a already FedRAMP authorized CSP who is a PAS or an IaaS, then yes, you can be working with customers to build potential features and automation capability to meet these KSIs and help them create their machine readable packages. You want to get customers, here's a route to do it. Go ahead and participate. If you're not an IaaS or a PaaS, then your participation would probably be up to you, be based on sort of, is it worth it to be in at the ground level while this is happening and have an opportunity to influence potential packages and things like that? Is that worth it for you? If so, yeah, you should participate. If somebody that has a current FedRAMP high authorization makes it through the pilot process, I promise we won't force you down to FedRAMP low. We'll just give you a special little badge or something.
Kind of related, or like the other side of that coin, right? If my CSP is already authorized and I'm in CONM on an annual assessment, do I need to start redesigning my existing process to meet this, to convert over to this newer process?
That depends on you. This process is designed to make it easier to have, get, and maintain FedRAMP authorization. Right now, 20X is really focused on initial authorization and not so much Rev 5 continuous monitoring. At some point in the future, whether it's a year, 10 years, at some point, I expect that we will see things transitioning over to this new process if it's successful. I would follow along and pay attention and make your own decision about when you want to try to cut over yourself.
Cool. Let's see.
Dan, do you mind if I hop in and ask some questions from GitHub?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, cool. We had a little thread open on GitHub specifically for Pete questions. So what will the three PAO's role be in the pilot? And will they be responsible for like validating KSIs?
So our role is going to be as the ultimate like arbitrator and acceptor of like, is the package that you create, do we accept that? Does that meet the KSIs? Like, would that qualify you for a FedRAMP authorization? Is that usable? Are we learning something from it? Does it show your security posture? We're not planning on being involved in extreme detail along the way, certainly not prescribing, make it look like this, use this format, anything like that. I expect robust conversations, both in the working group and with feedback on the key security indicators about how we can make sure that those are clear, understood, and how they can be addressed. And I expect FedRAMP to participate in that. The request for comment process is not for Q&A. That's for making comments on what you think about those KSIs. But the working groups discussing those and throwing around ideas of like, hey, if we do this, would it meet the KSI? We'll participate in those conversations.
Cool. Let's see. What happens if KSI evidence cannot be provided in a machine readable format, or like it's a screenshot or a ticket? Like what do we do then?
Do your best to establish machine readable formats. That's the goal of this. The expectation is not 100% coverage, but we do want to make it as capable as possible. So if you have a situation where you're attaching binary images in base64 encoded, whatever, inside a JSON payload, that's still a blob. It's still machine readable. That's okay. But it's not exciting, right? It's not real validation. A screenshot doesn't mean as much as actually pulling the direct information. So I would hope that we'd see some really innovative solutions to that. I don't know. It could be something like, using one of the many headless browser clients to go automatically pull that thing up, take a screenshot of it, do OCR on it, convert it. Now you've got data readable stuff. Like if you don't have an API, try another solution. If that's really, really not vibing at all and you just can't do it because the platform you're deployed on or the way that you use things just doesn't have the capability to really hook into automation, then you've learned and probably would need to consider upgrading, changing, modifying your approach for the future.
Cool. I'm gonna pass it off to Dan again to go into this Q&A.
So there are a couple of questions in the Q&A that all kind of amount to the same thing that I think you would want to talk about. So are KSIs a list of NIST technical controls, and where can I find the NIST technical controls that apply to each KSI?
No, that's entirely the point of KSIs, is that they describe capabilities that will meet the security requirements of underlying NIST controls. The whole reason why we're sitting here today in 2025 talking about automating controls is because it hasn't been really straightforward and easy for a lot of people in the industry to do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd all be using automated security packages with real-time validated assessment tied to NIST controls. NIST controls aren't designed for that. NIST controls are designed to give you a framework to assess explicit parts of your like your system and your application. Within that concept, detailed explicitly in all NIST documentation, is the idea of grouping controls together based on capabilities that must be met. That's what we've done with KSIs. We want you to meet the key security indicators, and that will provide evidence that you meet the key underlying controls of that baseline.
Excellent. And just for the record, where can people find the latest KSIs?
Right now, they're posted in the RFCs page. So we have a draft of the KSIs for low. They're going to be at FedRAMP.gov/RFCs. And we expect there will be some minor changes based on comment and feedback during the request for comment process. But we would recommend that you start developing and building things now. I don't see those changing significantly to the point where any work that is done to build a security program around those KSIs will result in lost work. You just might have a couple days of maybe renaming or something like that when the time comes and they are formalized.
Great. Next question. So how can FedRAMP or how will FedRAMP guarantee that my intellectual property, the CSP's intellectual property, firewall configurations, GRC configurations, whatever, is properly and fully protected?
So you should generally, so there's two aspects of this. One, we want your service security plans to be public to the greatest degree possible. Like exposing a service security plan, and yes, I'm calling it that instead of a system security plan for a reason. But like exposing a service security plan is not a high risk for a system if the system is designed well and runs properly. When it comes to business intelligence, like secret sauce, like methods about how you do stuff, then you need to decide where and how to redact. During the process, if we get to the point where you have materials that you don't want to make public, but you only want the FedRAMP PMO to see, then we will interact with you under an NDA. We'll work with our lawyers, and we'll get that stuff set up in a way that you can make that available to us so that we can see it and you can control access, et cetera. That's part of what we would ask you to deliver, right? If you have confidential business secrets that you're concerned about, then you're not going to be emailing it or submitting a Google form. So part of your submission should be figuring out how to make that information available to us via API in a machine readable format in a secure manner.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit more about how SOC 2 maps into this process, specifically for phase 1 eligibility? How is the SOC 2 giving enough fidelity for continuous monitoring, and how will it map to FISP?
Yeah, so there's a common misunderstanding about what we're trying to do here with commercial frameworks, and it's based on a long history of people using terms like reciprocity and reuse. The intent is first of all to focus on we chose SOC 2 because it is a common industry certification that a lot of small businesses and startups have. Like this is where they start when you're on a security journey. If you've done SOC 2, it means you have put some thought, effort, and time into thinking about security. Is it enough to take your SOC 2 type 2 audit and report and like give that to us and we look at it and we say, congratulations, you have FedRAMP? No, that's never going to happen. That's not the world. That's not the world we're talking about. What we want to explore during this pilot is if you have an existing SOC 2 type 2 audit report and you have done the work to create materials, processes, policies, documentation, and approaches based on that, what of those materials can be applied directly to the KSIs so that you don't have to create separate policies, separate materials, separate standards for your FedRAMP authorized Gov instance? We want to encourage reuse of your commercial instance. So that doesn't mean give us your SOC 2 type 2 audit report and we read through it and decide if you meet KSIs, but rather it would be, you might say, I have a change management policy. There's a bunch of documentation that I wrote for it. And it was reviewed by auditors. We confirmed that we follow this process. And so that probably meets the key security indicator for change management. And maybe I'll add a little bit of extra from some of the other context of working with a government system, but otherwise that should be enough that you don't have to rewrite something entirely new, and more importantly, keep it separate. We don't want people maintaining separate compliance frameworks with different documentation and different materials that they're engineers and everyone else is constantly trying to deconflict. We want you to apply that same information about your security decisions to all of these frameworks.
We're starting to see some really good kind of follow-up questions and things pop up in the Q&A. So I just want to encourage everybody, keep doing that. It makes this more exciting. ISO 27001. We have a couple of questions about, we've mentioned that SOC 2 is going to be a requirement. A SOC 2 or a recent FedRAMP authorization analysis is required. Will ISO 27001 be an acceptable substitute for a SOC 2, or does the ISO 27001 add any additional value?
So right now, the thing that we care about is like widest and broadest reuse for a specific target, which is people that have SOC 2 type 2s. It doesn't mean that ISO 27001 can't be applied. Those materials can't be applied in the same way. That's just not where we're going to be focusing our efforts. We're hoping to help with this most common, most used framework, especially for small businesses. We're hoping to help target those people and help bring them in. So if you have existing commercial certification, you already done work towards the KSIs, do it, participate, like write it down, etc. We're just not going to be going after starting conversations and talking about that yet. That's something that we'll be doing more in further phases. So you'll be ahead of the game if you do that. I would also point out just really quick, there's talk about like a existing federal ATO that is very sort of explicitly somebody that has gone through the risk management process with a federal agency, has an ATO. They have a whole system security plan based on Rev 5, but they want to move into FedRAMP, and for whatever reason, they're not able to use that ATO in order to get agency sponsorship. We'll help you reuse that to apply that toward, well, you will figure out how to reuse that, and we'll review your attempt at reusing that to meet the KSIs. That aspect of things is most likely going to be relatively limited, as there aren't too many folks that have agency ATOs but don't have FedRAMP authorizations. We just wanted to make sure that those cloud service providers did have an opportunity if they wanted to participate.
Excellent. I think we have time for at least a few more. This question came up in the Q&A. I feel obligated to pose it to you. Why bring our own machine-readable assessment language and not coalesce around OSCAL?
You can use OSCAL if you want. I'm not convinced OSCAL is the best way to do this. And I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions about the pros and cons of OSCAL. A lot of work has been put in OSCAL over the years to make it an incredible way to represent exactly what it is intended to represent, which is NIST SP 853 controls. That's not what we're doing. We're talking about security capabilities that match common industry accepted practices, right? Our approach is different. Therefore, there's a lot built into OSCAL that isn't relevant and not going to be needed in this context. Is OSCAL going to be the best way going forward? I don't know. I think it'll be really interesting. I'm okay with the YAML file. Let's see what it looks like. Let's talk about it. Let's see if it works for folks.
I love it. Small businesses have traditionally been excluded from the FedRAMP process due to its cost and complexity. Do you see recent advances, such as the introduction of KSI requirements and increased automation, helping to reduce the cost and make FedRAMP more accessible to smaller organizations?
Yes. I mean, I would turn that around and ask you if you're all seeing that, because if you're not seeing that this is driving opportunity open for small businesses, then I need to have a lot more conversations with the folks about why not. Because one of the very key goals of this whole process, just to be incredibly explicit over and over and over again, is that FedRAMP has been directed to develop a process that allows small businesses and large businesses to compete on a level playing field. And that's a huge aspect of what we're trying to do here, by making it so that you don't have to worry about all of the things that are outside your business, and you can focus on keeping your business simple and using tools provided by third parties or by your host provider to generate a majority of your plan, where you can engage with a 3PAO for a few days instead of weeks. This should open the door a little bit. And finally, by having a way that you can get into the marketplace without an agency sponsor, should do that too. And we'll certainly review during this process to make sure that it's doing that. But I fully expect that, I certainly hope that a significant portion of the folks that end up completing this phase one will be folks most of us have never heard of before.
I think two more questions I want to try and squeeze in here. A lot of our best questions are from anonymous participant. That whoever anonymous participant is, you're killing it out there. Have the days of making SSPs and supporting plans, procedures, and policies ended?
No, no, those days are still here. This is a pilot. Participate, hang out, follow along. Maybe at some point. That's certainly a target, right? Like coalescing around point-in-time documentation created once a year is not the type of security that we want to pursue for the federal government. It is quite the opposite. We're looking for continuous technical validation that is based on real facts in real time, focusing on real security. It's going to take us a little bit to get there, though.
So I'm going to finish this off with a hardball question just to maintain my street cred with the COWG. What is our plan B? As in, the future of FedRAMP is seemingly contingent upon CSPs designing and developing a means to automate the assessment process. What happens if FedRAMP doesn't get automated assessment processes in a timely manner? Automation is a low percentage of effort or at all.
I'm going to reframe that and answer that question in the exact opposite, which is that this is literally plan B, because plan A exists. It is the proven, process that everybody follows that has a lot of flaws and a lot of problems and everybody has complaining about for a long time and has significant gaps. And we're working to start to kind of shore up some of that so that it can continue to operate effectively and reasonably. If you haven't seen our other requests for comment that have put out, our significant change notification standard is going to really, really change the burden on the Rev 5 process. But that's plan A. FedRAMP 20X is plan B. This is the future. This is developing a thing. If it fails, all right, cool. We just try something else. But the whole time, we've got the main engine running, working, and it's not getting disrupted in the same way. So I'm not worried about what happens here. Let's see. Let's try something crazy. Let's see what happens, and we'll adjust and pivot. Like, this is not the days of spending years talking about memos. This is the day of demos. Like, we are going to go as fast as we can to get demos and learn from them.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I think we're going to leave it off there. So we have time to finish a few other housekeeping items. I want to assure everyone who's asked a question in the Q&A, we're going to make sure that all of these are answered over in the GitHub discussion group. And again, these have been there's so many great questions here that we didn't really get a chance to get to. I really encourage everybody to be asking these kinds of questions in the Q&A discussion group, right? It is that is a perfect place for this. I know most of the posting over there has been about people proposing solutions, which we think is great, but it's also the place for you to ask these kinds of questions and get more information about the pilot, about the program, about Pete's thoughts on things. Maybe we'll even create a special tag for you to flag things for Pete in particular. But Pete, thank you again so much for your time. This was, as always, I always love talking with Pete, and hearing his thoughts on these things. I'm a big Pete fan.
Yeah, thanks everyone for stopping by today. And again, like Dan said, like, this doesn't have to just be like Zoom meetings and things like that. We're really trying to drive this stuff into discussion forums. But like, participate as you can, how you can. We're out there, we're active, we're answering questions, but also never forget RTFM. Man, we got a lot of web pages walking through a lot of content of this. Like, go check it out. It's a good chance your question's already answered. Cheers.
Oh,
Fantastic.
we're not quite done. Pete's done. Just a couple little things at the end. Okay.
Just a few things we want to follow up on, directly related. Go ahead, next slide. So directly related to what Pete just said, RFCs are out. We definitely encourage everyone to go and review these and give us your feedback. The key security indicators RFC in particular, the key security indicators in particular, you need to review these in order to participate in the pilot, as the pilot is strongly linked to practical applications of the key security indicators. Please also take some time to review the other RFCs, significant change notification, and minimum boundary scope. Let us ask questions. Let us know what you think of these. And discussion starters. So finally, we're going to be starting some new discussion threads over on GitHub. We're going to be going really deep on a specific security area. This is going to be the primary source of feedback from FedRAMP during the pilot. So again, please, the questions have been so great in the Q&A. Ask all these questions over on GitHub. If you've already asked your question in the Q&A, we will move it over for you. But keep asking these kinds of questions. And to the anonymous participant, no, I don't think that Pete is really going to fire me, but pretty sure we'll be okay. And
Cool.
Kylie,
Awesome.
you want to
Okay.
bring us home?
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm gonna do this so fast so we can get you out of here a couple minutes early. Our next meeting is on the 14th of May at 1 p.m. If you want to show us something you're working on, bring forward a prototype, show a really cool way that you're seeing to address a KSI. We are interested in platforming that type of thing, so definitely post in the discussion forums. Obviously not to like pitch your product, but like we do want to see what's going on with you guys. And thank you very much for your time and attention. And we look forward to seeing you on GitHub. We will get these questions answered for you on GitHub. And we look forward to hearing more from all of you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.